Welcome to Tough Conversations with David Wood, where play meets depth. We help teams and high-performing leaders like you to master your tough conversations so you succeed in your career and in your life. When we avoid tough conversations, we stay small. Teams stay disengaged, conflicted, and ultimately end up quitting. When we lean in and master our tough conversations, they become the defining moments that literally shape our careers, our relationships, and our lives. So let's dive in and master your next tough conversation so you can be the leader that you would follow. Let's play.
So we have a full-on responsibility to cultivate a really healthy state of being, because that is the biggest impact we're going to have. It's prelingual.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Tough Conversations with David Wood. I have a guest that I'm excited about because she's not only an awesome human being, but also a really great friend. And I'm going to read her bio, but first I want to say welcome to the show, Saida Désilets.
Thank you so much, David. I think it's going to be a really delicious conversation today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about victimhood and subtle victimhood. How do we slip into it and get away from our sovereignty or away from our leadership? And how do we get back in it? Perfect. So let me read your bio so people get a sense of who you are. Dr. Saida Désilets wants to live in a world filled with audacious, sexually sovereign women living life on their own terms. As a counterculture creatrix and body philosopher, she's published The Emergence of the Sensual Woman and Desire. Her innovative method has been featured in the books Women's Wisdom, Women's Bodies and the Secret Pleasures of Menopause, Multi-Orgasmic Woman, and Body Wise. Saida is renowned for being the founder of the modern Jade Egg movement and a visionary spokesperson for sexual sovereignty, and has created the Daring Project, assisting women to audaciously move from being a victim to confidently thriving in life. When she's not dancing with her husband, you can find Saida leading wilderness safaris for women in South Africa or writing deliciously sensual poetry. And I believe that. So Saida, how are you? I haven't even asked you that. I wanted to save it until we were live here.
Right now, I'm in a particularly beautiful moment in my life where I've kind of had a reclamation. So there's a lot of delight, a lot of pleasure, a lot of playfulness, and an intense amount of creativity where I'm just able to bring my gifts, and they're beautifully received, and they're enhancing every situation that I'm finding myself in. So I'm fantastic. Thank you for asking.
Well, that fits with what I've seen of you. You know, usually when I Skype you or you send me a little video, it involves ocean waves lapping against a pristine shore. And I feel a bit jealous when I see that. I'm like, does she work? This woman just seems to have set up such a rich, juicy life.
Yeah, it's rich and it's simple. I think that we don't give enough attributes to simplicity and the very basics. And when we do, there's a richness that comes with that isn't necessarily related to things, material things, but a richness of enlivenment.
Yeah, I just realized we got a few viewers come in. If you guys want to say, hey, I think I can actually put you up on the screen. So say hi and tell us where you're coming in from. And I'm going to tag you, Saida, so maybe Perfect. Some of your followers can
join us.
Yes, Saida. Well, it's like 3 different ones. There's Dionysia.
Yeah, do that one. That one's the public page.
And is it Saida E. Désilets or Saida Désilets?
It should be Dr. Saida.
There's also that too, Dr. Saida Désilets.
Do that one.
All right.
Yep.
Sweet. Mm-hmm. All right, and we got, I see Bernard Wheatley from Australia is saying hey. So welcome, Bernie, one of my favorite people. So I want people to know, before we dive into victimhood and sovereignty, and the juicy Me Too topics, which might end up being in the second episode, I want to tell people how I know you. I met you at through Anton Diaz in New York, and it was probably some kind of tantric event. And then, and I'm going to out myself here and you. Can I say what the second event was that we met at?
Sure.
I think you're an open book. I don't normally reveal this on podcasts, but I like transparency. Always going for transparency. So we were at a BDSM event called Dark Odyssey, which was interesting in that it wasn't just straight sadomasochism, bondage, like that, but it included tantra. It included cuddle party. It included like different things. And you taught me something amazing. I don't know if you would remember this. You were the demo for something that Anton was teaching, and I volunteered. I'm like, yes, pick me. And I came out, and I was asked to put my hand on your belly. And I reached out and I did it. And you said, thank you. That was wonderful. Would you try it again? But this time, touch me with your presence first. And I was like, whoa. So I took my hand off and I just put my attention on your belly first. And you had a reaction to that. And then I placed my hand on it. It was a totally different experience. And so I think I want people and you to know I've had a crush on you for such a long time.
Fantastic. And I do remember that moment. And I think it was a special place. I was invited in. It was an unusual setting for me to facilitate and be present to. But I loved it. I loved the community. I loved the openness. I loved the conversation. Everything was very honest. And everything was invitation. So it felt like a healthy, exploratory space to participate in. Yeah.
And we've been in touch for years and hung out in Bali. And now I get to share your brilliance with listeners.
Fantastic.
So victimhood, what are a couple of the stronger examples of victimhood, and then some of the more subtle ways that we might slip into passive victimhood versus the opposite, which I also want to hear about?
I think first let's define what being victimized is in comparison to victimhood. So I think that everyone will experience a victimization experience in their life. This is something that happens out of our control that is usually scary or hurtful in some way. It could be like you get rear-ended. You didn't plan it. You had no idea, but you're a victim to some shock and pain, and you might carry that as trauma in your body, for example. So that is very common. If we start to map out all the times in our life we were surprised in a way that wasn't pleasant, that could be a victimization experience, meaning like someone robs your house or these things that you can't control. Now, the thing that can happen, say with me, several decades ago, I was told I had 2 weeks to live after a very traumatic rape. And so what was interesting about that is that I was victimized, correct? We would agree.
Well, I want to get into that too,
yeah.
But for now, let's say
so as
yes.
a definition, I didn't ask for that. It was violent and it almost cost me my life. So that's a victimization experience. Victimhood is then the adaptation of the identity of being a victim, which I never did. And it didn't occur to me that I was even a quote unquote rape victim till someone said it years later. And I said, I don't identify that way. And I think in part, it could have been why I healed so thoroughly, because I didn't latch on to that identity.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh boy, there's so much here. So firstly, you're not only raped, but then told you have 2 weeks to live. Is that because of the injuries from the rape?
Yeah, it was a pretty bad internal infection.
Wow.
Yeah.
So not only rape, but possible death. And I'm interested in, when you mentioned the rear ending in the car, you said that could be a victimization experience. And I'm interested in that. My mind went to, well, yeah, if it happens to you, in our society, we tend to say, well, you were victimized because you didn't ask for it. Mm-hmm. But you seem to leave a door open there to the idea that it might not be a victimization experience. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you read a lot about trauma, then some people like can handle something really scary and not experience it as trauma. It doesn't even stay in their body. They just process it, it's finished. But the majority of us will go in fight, flight, or freeze response in these kinds of moments. And we're not processing that very well. And so we're hanging on to it, and there's emotion around it. There's it could be a lot of body pain. I mean, a car accident is very painful. And then it's scary, and then we get angry. Like, there's a lot of things that can come up from something unexpected that's not asked for and definitely not pleasant.
I'm so interested in this because the victim seems to be a charged word, and I'm a big fan of Byron Katie and the concept that everything is a story.
Yeah.
And so, to use an example from my life, my little sister was killed when I was 7, and it was a traffic accident. And I watched it happen. So you could say that she's a victim, and I guess you could say I'm a victim because I didn't ask for it, or I was victimized.
Yeah.
But what occurs to me is that I wonder if I might get any choice over that story.
Well, the choice, and the choice that you have is the incident is not pleasant. So that's why I'm saying victimization is just one of those consistent human experiences. It's just how life, for some reason, we can't control every microfiber of everything and everyone. So there's going to be things that happen that are shocking. But the choice here, and I think the distinction we're attempting to make, is that we get to choose whether we are then labeling ourselves as victims forever and ever and ever, that it becomes part of our identity. So that you walk around, I am the victim of witnessing the death of my sister. And now your whole identity is wrapped around that. And then you meet other people who had the same thing happen, and you feel like you guys belong, and you hold each other close, and you tell each other your stories. And sure, there can be part of the healing journey is to speak and share the story, but we are not that who we are in our essence.
So in a way, I could be choosing ongoingly to be a victim versus I had a victimization experience.
It is an ongoing choice.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. All right. That gives me some agency. I'm always looking for...
It's an ongoing choice.
Right. So I'm pretty sure this is going to flow into our Me Too conversation, and we will get there. But I'm also interested... this has got such broad ramifications. What are some of the subtler ways? Let's say I'm a CEO or a vice president. What are some subtler ways that I might feel like I'm choosing a victim story with something that happens in the boardroom, and it's not a huge thing like getting mugged or raped or something like that?
Yeah, well, you could feel undermined, for example. That's often something that can be challenged when you're supposed to be the voice of the authority within that group, and then that voice gets undermined, and you could feel like you've been a victim to a bully, or just people who are out to get your spot in the hierarchy, or whatever the challenge is. So what's very important in leadership, and this is why I'm a huge advocate for embodied leadership, absolutely, that we no longer have space for anything less. So when we are in a leadership role, there's two things to understand. The state that we are in, and that we are in predominantly, so you can't fake this, is the thing that will permeate the space. And actually everyone else starts to adapt to your state when you're in that leadership or guide or healer doctor position. So we have a full-on responsibility to cultivate a really healthy state of being, because that is the biggest impact we're going to have. It's prelingual. We have been far more prelingual creatures than we have been linguistic creatures. Our bodies read things much faster in subtle ways than they do through words. And so when we can start understanding the impact we have purely by who we are, and then we're in a situation where we might be challenged. Our job before we even enter that meeting is, what are we in service to? Are we really here to multiply everyone's talent so that the vision can be realized? Or are we purely here to prove that we are worthy, or prove that we have this or that? What are we serving? And that's inner work. And that has to be done before the meeting, after the meeting, and even possibly if we're triggered in the meeting, to know how to ground and go, this is not about me, and keep coming back to the conversation with curiosity and leaning into that.
Wow. Okay. So I'm in a meeting. Someone says something I don't like. I feel undermined. I'm probably having some kind of contraction in my body. I may not even be aware of all this because not all of us have got the training that you have. And I feel like I'm just starting to catch up at the age of 51. So you may not even be aware of it. And then that could be like a victim state almost in your body. And what you're suggesting is you could shift that in your body so that you're no longer in a victim state, and you might be in a state of curiosity, perhaps.
Curiosity is a big one for that shift. So if you can imagine when you're standing, you don't have to do this in a meeting, but just you can practice this where you're standing and you're feeling that kind of contracted,
I'm going to do it now.
Yeah.
All right. I'm standing.
Okay. So really claim that, and then know that if you step over to your right, one step, you are going to be choosing that that's your sovereign space, and you fully claim that space. And it's if you can do it as a physical step, but it's an energetic shift of, okay, that sucks. This is not the time for that. What am I really here for? And we have that sudden shift into the gifts, what we're all about, etc. So we have to first practice it as a physical step so that the animal part of us gets it, because that's the part that often is reacting. And we start to understand that throughout the day, in the micro moments of our day, we will be constantly challenged to look at, oh, here's where I'm buying in, poor me. It makes people do stuff for me, or, I can get stuff out of people when I'm in this state because they sympathize, or, whatever. To here I am in my full, complete self, sovereign. And what is it that I'd love to create? And the question is always, what is it that I would love? And that shift from poor me, or this is hard, or like I'm little, to what is it that I love? I get that this is hard right now, but what would I love?
Yeah. Okay.
And we keep doing that. Like I want to hit someone, or I just want to curl up in a ball and cry. And I get that. But what would I really love? Oh, I really love this. And then it's a whole shift just in that inquiry. And that can be happening as an inner dialogue as you're in that meeting or conversation or discussion. And I do that a lot. So part of the embodiment is to know that you have that power and you have access to it at all times.
All right. So I want to delineate these two, separate them, because I'm seeing two paths that someone could take now. So one path is you could practice this embodiment, and I imagine that might take some work in a course or with a person, get some training and like, oh, what am I feeling in my body? I just took a deep breath and that felt good. How do I change my state here? I've got a client, a vice president, who is now meditating for 5 minutes in his car before he goes into the house when he comes home from work, because he wants to show up better for his family. And he's enrolled. He's like, I've never meditated, but I know that my energy is impacting my kids. So I love this about embodiment. That's a whole path, and maybe a whole separate podcast on that. And then also this question, what would I love? So I'm feeling undermined. I got this story that this person's against me. What would I love right here? All right, in this meeting, I'd love us to come together and come up with an idea that's better than what I've got, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated. I'm feeling something. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm pretty moved and astounded by you. You had a violent rape, and I would imagine that someone who's had that experience would have trouble expressing attraction and might not feel safe receiving attraction. And again, I'm flagged. We're going to get to the Me Too movement probably in the second episode. And here you are in our call, before this, you were flirting with me. You know, you got these sexy glasses, and you know, we're talking about you getting changed, and you you told me two words I don't normally hear that maybe we'll throw in the teaser for this episode. But I'm amazed that you can show up like that. You seem to be a shining example of someone who has healed a victimization event and has chosen a different story.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is when specialists who do work with these types of traumas have watched my videos or met me, they're like, there's no way that you had this near-death violent experience, because if you did, then you're completely thoroughly transformed it. And I said, well, isn't that sweet that there's a living example of what's possible? Right?
I got tingles, and you wanted me to have tingles, so I have tingles. Wow. So yeah, it's so, all right, you are a great example, because if you can rewrite that story from being a victim to what you call sovereignty, then I imagine we all have at least the possibility of doing it.
Imagine, for example, perhaps the trigger in the meeting is actually much earlier in life. Maybe your father didn't support you, or maybe your mother was super critical. Who knows when the wound happened, but then there's layers of that wound throughout life. And then imagine for a moment that you come to a place and you realize in yourself that you're not any of these ideas or thoughts or labels that somehow you took on through your domestication, through your conditioning, through being socialized. And you choose instead to, I like to call it, marinate in your own essence. That means you do meditate, and you push everything away, energetically and otherwise. And you just sit and you feel like, well, who am I? What is this creature? Outside of, if I dropped every label, if I dropped everything, what would really be here? And as you get to know yourself and you marinate in that essence, then that becomes your true north and your compass, because you're no longer swayed or that influenced by people's labels of you or opinions of you. And I really think right now in our culture, we're using labels far too much. There's so much identity politics. And the truth is, every living person on this planet is so much bigger than the tiny little box we're trying to squeeze them into. And I mean this in every area of life. So we must give ourselves that permission to sit outside of these boxes and go, well, what's here?
Wow.
And, yeah.
All right. So we got three juicy topics for this episode, and then I am going to tease people. We're going to wrap this up and move to the next interview, and where we talk about the Me Too movement, expressing attraction, vocational arousal. So what I got out of this episode, three big things, is, well, victimhood versus having a victimizing experience. I got asking the question when you're feeling victimized or something's against you, what would I love here? And that's a leadership move right there. And it doesn't have to be some huge, it doesn't have to be a rape. It doesn't have to be a death of somebody. It doesn't have to be being mugged. It could be just as simple as, I don't like what's happening here, and it's happening to me. Is the story. You've also brought up the concept of embodied leadership, and how our own state is going to ripple out and influence people. Can't affect that. That's happening. You can't stop that. So change your state, and they're going to pick up on those cues. And then I got a feeling, I thought you've just brought up one more, which is the idea of sitting, meditating, until you can come close to and get a glimpse, a sense of who you truly are, so that you're not going to be thrown by all the labels people want to show on you, put on you. And Bernard Wheatley has just said, what an extraordinary, inspiring human being.
Thank you, Bernie.
Yes, she is. Saida, anything you want to say to people before I ask them where they can find out about you? Anything that just puts the icing on the cake here, or wraps it up?
I just love that we are all extraordinary beings, and we're extraordinary, and to love that that ability for us to just, we don't have to be special because we are innately unique and special. So when we have that kind of ability to just sit with, I'm ordinary, I don't have to be special, there's a deep love that emerges. You're like, you're so fascinated with this creature that you are. And then you start to realize, well, actually, I'm here and I belong to life. And that's an extraordinary moment. And it's simply because you've connected with yourself, then you make that link with life as well.
Wow. I feel like you're describing the path that I hope I'm on and that I plan to keep following. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, Dare Your Desire is my website. And I recently did a TEDx talk, so you can find me on YouTube, The Naked Truth About Desire. So.
All right. So Dare to Desire. And on YouTube, they can find your TEDx talk, The Naked Truth About Desire.
Yeah. So Dare Your Desire.
Dare Your Desire.
Yeah.
.com.
Yep.
Wonderful. Saida, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Tough Conversations with David Wood. Now it's action time. Mastering your tough conversations will have a major impact on your team, your company, and you as a high-performing executive or entrepreneur. If you're ready, request a discovery session with me at playforreal.life so we can transform your team, your company, and you. And if you've enjoyed this episode, I would love you to help me spread this message of tough conversations in a very simple way. Just leave a public review at playforreal.life/podcast. And you may hear me read it out loud and thank you live on a future podcast. Now, let's play.